Welcome to EPG Pathashala. I am Ravi Korisekar, Senior Fellow, Dr. V.S. Wakankar, Archaeological Research Institute, Bhopal. The subject is Indian culture. The paper is Pre- and Proto-Historic Cultures of India. The module is Deccan Chalcolithic Cultures. The Deccan Chalcolithic cultures cover a time period from 2200 to 700 BCE. And the region covered by the Deccan Chalcolithic is the region of the Tape Valley in the north and the Upper Krishna Basin in the south. For the south of the Upper Krishna, we have yet another culture geographic area known as Southern Neolithic Province. And to the north of Deccan Chalcolithic geographical area, we have Central and Western Indian Chalcolithic Province. Throughout the second millennium BCE, smaller scale regional cultures sprang up in the Indian subcontinent. In the present day states of Maharashtra, the distinctive Nasik Jorve culture emerged. The Deccan Chalcolithic is known from excavations at Bahal, Bahurupa, Chandoli, Daimabad, Inamgaon, Jorve, Kaute, Nasik, Nevasa, Prakash, Savalda, Songaon, Tekwada, and Walki. However, the more recent excavations are usually considered to provide the most thorough and accurate picture of the period, and those will be the focus of this particular presentation. Because at sites like Inamgaon and Kaute and smaller sites like Walki, multidisciplinary investigations have been carried out, which throw a lot of light on socio-economic aspects of the Deccan Chalcolithic culture. Earlier excavations were focusing on the study of material culture remains such as pottery, stone tools, the nature of settlement, the characteristic features of material culture, and so on and so forth. But with the emergence of multidisciplinary investigations, which involved the study of archaeoanthropology, archaeobotany, archaeozoology, archaeochemistry, and also the application of geographical methods for understanding the settlement patterns, have enriched our knowledge of the culture systems which flourished in the northern Deccan region between 2200 BC and 700 BCE. The presentation will provide an overview of the climate and environmental circumstances, the settlement pattern and lifestyle, demography, material culture, subsistence, and the health of the Deccan Chalcolithic people who lived in the region. And the focus will be on methodology that has been adopted in the study of various aspects of multidisciplinary research. The map of the Deccan Chalcolithic settlements demonstrates that these communities were founded on the banks of the rivers such as the Krishna, an arterial stream, and all its tributaries including Bhima and at its tributaries, as well as the upper Godavari basin like the main river Godavari and its tributaries like Pravara, and further north into the Tapi Valley. The area covered by the Deccan Chalcolithic includes the river basins which are east flowing rivers rising in the Western Ghats. The Tapi in the north, Godavari in the middle, Bhima and Krishna in the lower southern part. From the peaks of the Western Ghats, these rivers flow eastwards into the plains of the Western Deccan region and flow further eastwards into Andhra Pradesh, and finally they debouch into the Bay of Bengal. The presentation also focuses on the archaeological record from diverse settlement types. Large cities like Daimabad, medium-sized settlements like Inamgaon, small settlements like Nevasa and Walki, and encampments like Kaute. On this particular map, we have to note the small settlement community of Nevasa sits across the river from the large city of Daimabad. Similarly, the small settlement community of Walki sits across the river from the medium-sized village at Inamgaon. So the encampment at Kaute is not situated on a river bank, but is located out in the semi-arid plains of northern Maharashtra. In prime, it is basically a grassland which was very useful for grazing purposes. The Deccan Chalcolithic can be characterized in general as a period of time after the disintegration of the Indus or Harappan civilization, when agrarian villages thrived in peninsular India. The second millennium BC in general is known as the localization era in the greater Indus Valley. Here, the Indus people left the urban centers and returned to their natal communities or traveled to agrarian settlements on the margins of Indus territory and established themselves there, leaving behind the majority of urban characteristics, including the language. Deccan Chalcolithic people founded their communities after 2200 BCE, and their agrarian lifestyle flourished until 1000 BCE. When these villages went through a period of decline, archaeologists divide this period into 5 phases. Research questions for sites with deposits from the first 3 phases involve the origin of the Chalcolithic peoples, their connection with the Harappans and other agrarian people further north in the Malwa region of Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, etc. Research questions in the early and late Jorwe phases usually focus on questions about climate and social changes, subsistence transition, and the decline in the size of human settlements, particularly because the early Jorwe was characterized as relatively prosperous by archaeologists. And what we see here is 5 phase included in Deccan Chalcolithic, begins from the Savalda period, late Harappan period, Malwa phase, early Jorwe phase, and late Jorwe phase. This is well documented from one of the multicultural sites, that is Daimabad, which is located on the river Pravara in the Godavari basin. This picture symbolizes some of the major shifts that occurred from early to late Jorwe at the site of Inamgaon. We see the Deccan Chalcolithic ending around 1000 BCE at most of the sites in the northern Deccan. The early Jorwe having been characterized by farming, cattle raising, large rectangular houses, and craft production focused on bead making and fine ceramics. Most settlements were abandoned at the end of this phase. Archaeologists have suggested the ultimate cause of these so-called changes was because of climate change. However, this is in dispute. First, because it is unclear that there was a dramatic climate change around 1000 BCE. Paleoclimate evidence suggests that semi-arid period commenced around 2200 BCE and continued until the end of the first millennium BCE. So aridity may actually have peaked around 1400 BCE, right when the early Jorwe began. These data suggest that Deccan Chalcolithic people founded these villages in the context of a semi-arid climate, were well adapted to life in a semi-arid climate, and it is unclear how much climate and environmental degradation, particularly soil salinization and so on, have resulted from over-irrigation. Deccan Chalcolithic people may have abandoned their villages, not because of large-scale climate change, but rather because of small-scale human-induced environmental changes. Let us take a closer look at some of the evidence from specific Deccan Chalcolithic settlements, beginning with Daimabad. Daimabad is located in the Godavari river valley of northern Maharashtra. The archaeological mound sits 120 meters north of the Pravara riverbed. The western portion of the site was disturbed by construction of a railway lane and agricultural fields to the north of the mound. So its original geographic extent is not well documented. But at the same time, first excavations in 1958-59, the site covered 1000 into 500 meters area. And this site was first excavated by S.A. Ali of the Archaeological Survey of India. The archaeological deposits are up to about 5 meters deep from the surface of the floodplain. 3 seasons of excavations took place at the site, and the trenches excavated during each season are depicted in the above map. Daimabad was occupied for all 5 phases of Deccan Chalcolithic. The uppermost 2 meters of deposits were from the early Jorwe phase, followed by 80 centimeters of deposit from the Malwa phase, which has a time bracket of 1600 to 1400 BCE. 80 centimeters of deposit from the Daimabad phase dating in time from 1800 to 1600 BCE. 50 centimeters of deposits from the late Harappan phase, that is 1800 to 1600 BCE, and 20 to 30 centimeters from the Savalda phase dating back to 2200 to 1800 BCE. Plant remains found throughout the sequence at Daimabad consisted of charred seeds, leaf impressions, charcoal and fruits. Impressions of grass leaves are found embedded in clay lumps, and the remains of burned grass are found in some of the burials. Carbonized grains included barley, wheat, millet, rice, gram, lentils, beans, peas, bear, among other trees used today for making henna, feeding silkworms, and for medicinal purposes. Structures exposed at Daimabad were classified according to their inferred function or the occupant's occupation. For example, defense structures, embankments, religious structures, workshops, frieze house, nobleman or stonecutter's house, etc. Workshops were places where a large number of individuals were working in manufacturing. Workshops included a coppersmith's workshop, stonecutter's workshop, pottery kilns, and a butcher's hut. Craftsmen's houses were residences and places for manufacturing. So if there was evidence for habitation and craftsmanship, it was deemed a craftsman's house. So for example, the lime maker's house was identified on the basis of a ceramic vessel containing lime. Bead makers' homes were inferred from the presence of unfinished beads within the residence. Carpenters' houses were inferred from the presence of drills. Potters' houses were recognized by the presence of places to store unfinished parts. A merchant community was identified by the presence of seals and scales. A coppersmith's place was identified by the presence of a lump of copper slag, and so on. Houses were identified as residences where there was no evidence as to specific occupation of the inhabitant. Religious structures were identified by their unusual spherical shape and the presence of a fire pit containing charred bones and seeds, thought to represent sacrificial activity. Some of these structures contained figurines that were deemed goddesses or goddess figurines. Round structures that did not contain evidence of a fire altar were deemed storage silos or places for storing surplus grains and so on. These contained features designed to raise storage bins above the ground. They often contained large storage jars, and they often contained burials as well. Distinctive house types have been identified based on documentation of variety of remains from each of the houses that were excavated. So for example, identification of a bead maker's house was made on the basis of occurrence of waste products emerging from lapidary activity. A potter's house was identified based on identification of scatter of potsherds and a pit with ash, which indicated that this was because of pot making activity, and the pit was perhaps there to subject the pots for heating and so on and so forth. Similarly, the butcher's house at Daimabad in the Jorwe phase has been identified by the presence of number of post holes which were meant for tying the animals, and also the presence of bones scattered on the surface of the floor of the house, and which also bear cut marks, deliberate cut marks. That is a clear indication of butchering activity. And that is how different activity areas and distribution of activities across the space during a particular cultural phase can be identified. This is helping us in the reconstruction of what we call micro settlement pattern. Another important aspect of Deccan Chalcolithic cultures is the presence of numerous burials at various cultural periods, and also the presence of human skeletal remains which were found contained in containers like earthenware pottery, which were also found in some pits, and there were varieties of burials. And most of these burial remains have been systematically studied by archaeoanthropologists to identify the age of the individual at time of death, the sex of individual, the cause of death, and several other pathological investigations could also be carried out. And these archaeoanthropologists are also very particular to study the dental remains of the burial people who were buried there, because there were several dental diseases which were also causing death. For example, dental caries. Although we have not found separate areas for burying the dead, unlike the Harappan settlements, in the context of Deccan Chalcolithic cultures, most of the burials were within the settlement. They are otherwise called domestic burials. So, as mentioned earlier, one adult male was buried in the late Harappan phase. This is depicted in the photo on the right side. This was the first only burial from this particular phase. This middle-aged man's body was laid to rest in a mud brick lined chamber located in the settlement but near to the river bank. His body was covered with a shroud of hem-like material. According to the excavators, the use of mud bricks with the ratio of 4:2:1, the presence of a shroud and the use of a coffin resembled burial 10 from the city of Harappa. The fact that it was located in the settlement differs from any known Harappan practice. This specially made coffin floor and the presence of hemp-like material indicates great pain taken in this mortuary treatment. Burials in the Malwa and Jorwe phases included pit burials, symbolic burials, and post-cremation pot burials. Twin urn burials began in the Malwa phase at Daimabad. At most Deccan Chalcolithic sites like Nevasa, Inamgaon, Tekkalkota, Hallur, Ramapuram, this type of interment began in the Jorwe phase or even later. This tradition differs from that at Cemetery H at Harappa in that these urns are placed mouth to mouth horizontally in the pit. At Harappa, the burial urns are upright in the ground. The upper urn inverted over the mouth of the lower. Both mortuary traditions use the lota as the primary ceramic item provided to the dead, but the Deccan Chalcolithic, the lota were made in a utilitarian fabric rather than a separate mortuary fabric. So what we have to understand here is that relationship between Harappan and Deccan Chalcolithic can also be inferred on the basis of burial practices that we see at Daimabad. Evidence of continuation of Harappan burial practice is also seen in one of the burials which was located within the settlement, unlike the Harappan separate cemetery. But here the mud brick floor and the presence mud brick lined pit was specifically made in order to inter the dead. And in addition to that, we also see different varieties of burials in the later period, in the Malwa and Jorwe periods. We come across pit burials, and little later we come across urn burials. Urn burials become very common in the Jorwe period, not only in the Deccan Chalcolithic but elsewhere outside the Deccan Chalcolithic region. So burial practices have also helped us understand the rituals associated with the burial, as well as the belief systems that existed among the communities during the late Harappan period as well as Malwa and Jorwe periods. From the Malwa transitional phase, the bodies of the infants and children under 5 years were interred in the settlement area in double or single urns. The urns were constructed of a burnished grey ware and Malwa ware, and in the case of double urns, the northern vessel was placed within the mouth of the southern. Motifs of the Malwa ware urns included dogs, peacocks, and images of the sun. Dr. Sali, who excavated the site of Daimabad, attributes this imagery to a concept of Yama and Surya. For the single urn burials, the urn was constructed of Malwa ware, and this was covered by a shallower bowl of burnished ware. Now what we understand here is that the utilitarian pottery were made separately in comparison with the pottery which were deliberately made for burying the dead. When urn burials become very common, we have the urns placed mouth to mouth, and the dead are enclosed into these urns. And the larger urn is placed towards north and the smaller urn is placed towards the south. In addition to this, the pottery associated with burial also have distinctive decorations on the surface, outer surface. And then these urns were also accompanied by smaller pottery as burial goods. Now, ceramic styles are the ones which have helped us identify distinctive cultural phases at multicultural settlements which have a long culture history. Painted pottery was the foundation for identifying different time periods and establishing the culture history at Daimabad. The ceramics from each time period differ in regard to the manufacturing process and the style of decoration. Burnished grey ware was found in all the phases represented at the site. This coarse ceramic was made on a wheel and then burnished in a low temperature firing. The colors represented are grey, blotchy grey, drab and black. The ceramic was used to make bowls, cup on stand, lota and kunda, a globular vase used in mortuary ritual. Some of these forms also included lids. Savalda ceramics were of a medium to coarse fabric, made on a slow wheel turned as a paring tool removed material from the internal surface. Sand, lime or shell was used to temper the clay. The blotchy surface suggests firing occurred at a low temperature. Savalda ware is painted in red ochre, which is unique to that particular phase. So, color of Savalda ware in other areas of peninsula is light red, orange or pink, but at Daimabad it is known as brown, black or tan chocolate colored pottery. In addition to pottery, other kinds of weapons and tools are also found unique to this particular Savalda period. These include arrows, arrowheads, harpoons and barbed fish hooks and so on. From weapons and tools, other designs included in this surface decoration of pottery are geometric and human simple forms are also found on the outer surface of the pottery. The late Harappan ceramic forms were created from a fine levigated clay body tempered with fine sand, lime or shell powder and shaped on fast turned wheel. The firing was controlled and uniform and occurred under oxidizing conditions. The late Harappan red ware is sturdier and finer than all of the other wares represented at Daimabad. Here what we have to understand is culture history of any settlement is based on identifying distinctive pottery types in terms of technology and finishing of the pottery. As we know, when we go through the module on ceramic technology, there are various stages of manufacturing pottery. So understanding these stages of manufacturing pottery from distinctive cultural periods has helped in identifying typical characteristics of the ware belonging to Savalda period, belonging to late Harappan period, belonging to Malwa period, early Jorwe period and late Jorwe period. Now here also the technical aspects of pottery have helped in understanding the manner in which the clays were molded or clays were given form and then subject to firing. firing at low temperatures, firing at higher temperatures, and then use of wheel, slow turned wheel and fast turned wheel. All these can be seen from the pottery belonging to distinctive cultural periods like Savalda in the early stages, followed by late Harappan, Malwa period, early Jorwe and late Jorwe, and so on. Now their widespread distribution is also seen across a large number of sites distributed in the Deccan region. After understanding distinctive types of pottery and the fact that different varieties of pots were manufactured for different purposes, let us now look at other artifacts that we have recovered from distinctive Chalcolithic phases at Daimabad. For example, on the top left hand corner of this particular slide, we have displayed series of blade tools. Now these blades were very important component of material culture in the Chalcolithic cultures of Deccan, and these blades were made from varieties of stones such as jasper, agate, chalcedony, quartz, and so on and so forth. And this raw material for these particular blade tools were locally available in the region, and they made the best use of this cryptocrystalline silica material for making blade tools. In addition to that, we also have larger stone artifacts which also could be classified as ritual objects. For example, the one in the middle on the top row is looks like a phallic symbol, and to its right we have a very good example of copper known to these Chalcolithic people in this area. It's an excellent example of a bangle. Further below this particular bangle, we have the most well-known example of a bronze sculpture of a cattle, which was actually a ceremonial object that has been ascribed to the survival of Harappan bronze technology in the Deccan Chalcolithic. To the bottom left-hand corner, we have very good example of the existence of bead manufacturing activity. Like I mentioned on earlier occasions, that there are houses which were meant for manufacturing stone beads, and the house of bead makers have also been identified. Here we have excellent examples of varieties of beads, biconical beads, barrel beads, spherical beads, and so on, made from semi-precious stones that also occur in the region of the Deccan Chalcolithic. Now we discussed about the importance of archaeoanthropological investigations at a number of these Chalcolithic sites in the Deccan. Here this slide clearly shows the remains of human skeletal remains. Only 45 of the skeletons excavated from Daimabad are available for study. Of those, there are 13 infants that died at or around the time of birth. There are 8 infants who died in the first 6 months of life, and 8 who died around 1 year of age, and 9 children who died between 18 months and 5 years. What this actually tells us is that infant mortality in the Deccan Chalcolithic was much higher, and archaeoanthropologists help us understand what were the factors that led to higher incidence of infant mortality. Now, another important site representing Deccan Chalcolithic culture is Nevasa. This was the first site discovered by H.D. Sankalia in the 1950s, and it was also excavated. That was the time when multidisciplinary investigations were not employed for understanding or reconstructing culture history of the Deccan Chalcolithic. But Nevasa was one of the early Deccan Chalcolithic sites which revealed the multicultural nature of the culture history in this region. The site is situated on the river Pravara, a tributary of the Godavari river, and this is lying upstream of the larger city of Daimabad in the same river valley. This site was repeatedly occupied throughout the late Pleistocene and Holocene. What it means is that we have evidence for Paleolithic as well as Mesolithic human activity in the area, with the deposits spanning from Acheulean through historical periods. But here we focus only on Chalcolithic deposits. The Chalcolithic deposits span the Jorwe phase from 1500 to 700 BCE, and the site was abandoned after 500 years of occupation. Nevasa was settled in the Jorwe phase by a small population of approximately 500 people. They lived in small mud houses with wooden posts and floors constructed of rammed clay mixed with lime and hay. Only a small area was excavated, but the houses in that area were small and round, approximately 50 square feet in size. So unlike Daimabad, what we have here is that the settlement of the Chalcolithic phase was much smaller in area. Also, this was dependent on the area excavated. But here what we have seen is that the Chalcolithic settlement here begins from early Jorwe period. Now we come to the when we come to the site of Nevasa, we see that the settlement was not as large as the settlement at Daimabad, and it is clear that the people of Nevasa made very fine ceramics, and they did not use copper extensively, but copper objects like blades, hooks, chisels and poker rods and wire were found in the site, along with beads of locally obtained crafted steatite, agate and terracotta objects included hubbles, wheels, etc. The people of Nevasa may have relied heavily on beef and pork for the subsistence, though some floral remains were also recovered at the site. The site was small, with a population of about 500 people at the height of the Jorwe phase, and thus may consider it to have been a satellite settlement of Daimabad and comprised of craftsmen or other communities that provided support for the larger settlement of Daimabad. Now the excavation carried out both at Daimabad and earlier at Jorwe have now led to establishing some kind of relationship between Daimabad and Jorwe. Jorwe, the characteristic material that have been recovered from the Jorwe phase at Nevasa reveal that perhaps this was a satellite settlement of the larger Daimabad, and these settlements also revealed the existence of lapidary activity, pottery making activity, terracotta making activity, and so on and so forth. And the beads were definitely made from locally occurring semi-precious stones, and the blade tools were made from agate and jasper and so on and so forth. And distinctive occurrence of steatite beads has also been noted at Jorwe. Similar to the type of burials we found at Daimabad in the Jorwe phase, even at Nevasa we have very good examples of urn burials. So the large urns which were specifically made for burying the dead were placed mouth to mouth, and then the pots were buried in a pit. One of the young adult females suffered from dental caries and broken shoulder, and trauma that may have resulted from an accidental injury led to the death. One of the young adult females suffered from chronic maxillary sinus infection, which was recorded as a large cyst in her maxillary sinus. What this helps us understand is pathological studies carried out by archaeoanthropologists help us identify the cause of death at the time, age of the death, and so on and so forth. Now, the diseases suffered by the Chalcolithic population has been inferred through archaeoanthropological study. Understanding the varieties of diseases that afflicted the population is an important aspect of archaeoanthropology. And as I mentioned earlier, existence of dental caries, which is a fatal disease, has been recognized through archaeoanthropological study of skeletal remains excavated from burials at Jorwe and also Daimabad. Now, another major excavation that has been carried out relating to Deccan Chalcolithic is the site of Inamgaon. This is further south of the Pravara basin. It is located on the God River, a tributary of the Bhima, in Ahmednagar district of Maharashtra. A medium-sized settlement and distinctively a Chalcolithic settlement, and settlement is relatively larger than Nevasa, while we were able to infer about 500 people being inhabitants at Nevasa. Here the site of Inamgaon reveals the presence of more than 1,000 people during the early Jorwe period, which lasted from 1500 to 1000 BCE. The site consists of about 5 mounds, but excavations were primarily carried out on only one mound. Inamgaon was investigated thoroughly in regard to its environment, settlement patterns, subsistence, and human environmental interactions. That's one reason we have more or less holistic reconstruction of the life phase of the Chalcolithic people who lived in the Deccan region. And the investigations relating to agricultural crops that were cultivated by the Deccan Chalcolithic people has thrown adequate light on various types of crops which were native to this land as well as crops which were introduced into this area. We have wide varieties of crops which were cultivated. We also have evidence of structures that might have facilitated small-scale irrigation agriculture in this area. This particular slide gives us an idea of the type of houses that were built by the Deccan Chalcolithic people during the Malwa and Jorwe phases at Inamgaon. We do not have any evidence of mud brick making activity, while we have some examples at Daimabad which were specifically seen in the context of burials, indicating some continuity of Harappan tradition. Here at Inamgaon, we have no evidence of brick structures at all. Inamgaon was initially settled in the Malwa period. Of 32 houses excavated from that time period between 1600 and 1400 BCE, 28 were large rectangular dwellings, 1 was circular and 3 were pit dwellings. So here we have yet another variety of houses that were in use. The existence of pit burials, which is not commonly seen elsewhere, is very well documented at Inamgaon. These houses were distinguished by their paved floors. So the houses were paved with mud, lime and so on and so forth. The roofs were made of local grasses and reeds. And then even at Inamgaon, the micro-settlement pattern has been reconstructed based on spatial expansion of the mound which was subjected to excavation over a long period of time. The culture history here begins from Malwa phase and ends with late Jorwe phase. Early Jorwe houses at Inamgaon were also rectangular in plan, but were on an average slightly smaller at 15 square meters. The 33 houses were excavated from this period and they were largely the same as Malwa houses. 30 were rectangular and 3 were circular. One house had a drainage ditch running through the courtyard, which seems to have accomplished draining runoff from the roof. Floors were now plastered with mud and lime, but cow dung was also mixed in. Grain storage was similar to the Malwa phase. In pit silos, wicker and large legged ceramic jars on day platforms, incense burners are found in houses from this phase. So this slide clearly shows the plan of the houses, rectangular houses and occasional circular houses. Between early and late Jorwe at Inamgaon, there is a transition from almost exclusively large rectangular houses to a predominance of small rounded houses. The archaeologists excavated 16 houses in the late Jorwe phase during the period from 1000 to 700 BCE. Dhaulikar, who was the chief excavator, describes the transition as the overall economic degeneration as reflected in the nature of houses, and the appearance of more number of circular houses were attributed to decline in economic activity and also population and so on and so forth. At Inamgaon also there is clear evidence of public architecture, as can be seen from this particular site. We have this example of a lime kiln, pottery kiln, a ditch, fortification wall, jetty, irrigation canals and so on. All these large public facilities would have taken substantial effort to build and demonstrated Inamgaon was an important center for production of ceramics, as the kiln has no parallels elsewhere in India. Large number of burials have also been excavated, and variety of burials have also been excavated, and most of these burials are situated within the settlement. As can be seen from this particular slide, which shows one example of a pit burial here. As many as 23 burials from the early period, that is Malwa period, 72 from the early Jorwe period, and much higher number of burials, up to about 170 burials were excavated in the late Jorwe period. Urn burials are also common in this area. Twin burials, twin urn burials, single urn burials and so on. Even sarcophagi, legged urn burials are also known from the late Jorwe period at Inamgaon. This is the example of sarcophagus, or an example of legged urn which is placed vertically, and the dead is also seated in the large urn and then buried in the pit. That evidence of this specific variety of burial comes from late Jorwe period at Inamgaon. The burial with variety of burial goods is also very common. Most of the burials contained burial goods which accompanied the dead. Then varieties of pottery that were made, distinctive varieties of pottery. Spouted pottery is very common with Jorwe, and carinated pottery is a distinctive feature of the Jorwe ware and so on. And their Malwa and early Jorwe ceramics are fine bodied, well fired and nicely decorated with paintings in black. Black on red ware is the term used for describing Malwa ware as well as Jorwe ware. Only the difference between Malwa and Jorwe ware is the technique of manufacture. These are examples of variety of bowls in late Jorwe, and they were little coarser in fabric and texture and so on and so forth. Now we have copper, as we know, was very common amongst these Chalcolithic communities. That is why the term Chalcolithic being applied here. Raw material are scarce. Copper raw material is scarce, but then occasionally we have come across variety of copper objects from different time periods in Inamgaon. Shell objects also are found at Inamgaon. So antler and bone specimens have also been found. The best examples of terracotta figures are animal representations, as well as a representation of a female form who has been identified as a ritual object or a mother goddess, a popular fertility deity that we have known from very early days in the history of mankind. This slide actually explains the study carried out by the author of this module, that Robin Shug, who suggests that local environmental and social processes led to the abandonment of these villages. There were minor climate perturbations during this period, but nothing of a magnitude unseen by Chalcolithic people before. Aridity peaked in the early Jorwe, so it seems unlikely climate change would have affected the population to the extent that has been suggested by earlier workers. In addition, the farmers switched away from drought-resistant crops towards saline-tolerant crops that suggested local environmental changes rather than sweeping climatic change to a larger scale. Whatever the cause of culture change from early Jorwe to late Jorwe, it does seem clear that most of the villages were abandoned at the end of the early Jorwe period. So in conclusion, what we can say is that Deccan Chalcolithic culture history has given us very clear evidence of the fact that there cannot be generalizations to explain the origin, growth and decline of cultures. There may be multiple reasons for the events that have occurred in the past, particularly in the context of Chalcolithic cultures of the Deccan. But there is clear evidence of malnutrition as being one of the major reasons of high rate of infant mortality and so on, and that the people were capable of expanding over a larger area with the coming up of large scale production of pottery and such other materials, and engage these cultural products in internal as well as external trade. And this information along with the e-text will help you understand the Deccan Chalcolithic cultures much more clearly. Thank you.